Could we go to the next slide, Nick? Okay. All right, let's get started. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the UU Fellowship of Beaufort's virtual worship service on Sunday, August 29th. We are glad you are here this morning, whether you're joining us on your laptop or iPad or tablet or smartphone or some other device that I don't know about. I'm the Reverend Lori Lobbin, and it is my pleasure and privilege to serve this fellowship as its minister. Whatever it is that brought you to this community, whichever paths you have traveled, whomever you love, whatever your ethnicity or immigration status, know that you will find safe harbor here. We welcome you as your whole self to this sacred time and place. At UUFB, we celebrate the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. With open minds and hearts and guided by love, we work together to create the beloved community of justice, compassion, and peace. And now I'm changing the welcome and announcements a little bit this morning, just a little bit of an experiment. So at this time, I invite you to join me as you are willing in affirming the fellowship's mission statement, which Nick will put up on the screen for us. Our mission is to create a joyful sanctuary for spiritual and intellectual growth, embracing all souls in a nurturing community from which we go forth as activists for social justice and as stewards of the natural world. And as we move into the remainder of the service, I invite you to take a few deep breaths, settle in as Chris plays our prelude. Our words for coming together are from Sharon Wiley. It is okay to be tired of change. It is okay to be tired of everything different. Okay to feel weary of resiliency and wholeness and learning and growth, and okay to yearn simply for rest. It's okay to be grouchy and unsatisfied, and all the ordinary human ways of being that we are. Let this morning be a reminder that you are loved. Let our time together soothe what is restless in you. May you be comforted in knowing that whatever you are feeling today and other days, you are not alone. You are never alone. Come, let us worship together. We light our chalice for the strength of our gathering in community once again. And we can sing together online. I mean, please mute yourselves, but we can sing along to Chris as she plays our opening song, Come Sing a Song with Me. Chris?
And here we go. I hope that you will sing loudly and not worry about who may hear you as long as you're muted.
Thanks, Chris. That was lovely. And now let's shift gears a bit. And I invite you to join your hearts and minds with mine in a spirit of contemplation, meditation, and prayer with this meditation video. Nick? Dandelion Kindness by Fiona Heath, adapted. In hard times, kindness between people is needed and necessary. As people of the chalice, kindness is the lived expression of the principles we hold dear. Being kind to ourselves affirms our own value, even when others would deny it. Acts of kindness toward others show that they have value and worth outside of any moment or relationship. Kindness also roots us in the seventh principle, the understanding of our interdependence. We are deeply connected to all other life on earth. We are all in this together. Kindness that requires us to dig deep and unearth our resiliency can be thought of as dandelion kindness. If you have seen a patch of grass in spring, you know that dandelions are tenacious. Mow them down and they spring back up. Their roots go down, deep down. You can rip out the stems and tear off the leaves, and with time the dandelion will once more bloom a cheerful yellow. Dandelion kindness, kindness that wells up in the face of all challenges, is what we need. We get torn down and we grow back up. We face our struggles and we help each other survive. Dandelion kindness does not mean we are going to be kind all the time in every moment. No perfect people here. It means we return again and again to kindness as our baseline. So I have one short reading this morning. It is titled The Gates of Hope by Victoria Safford. Our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, not the stalwart, boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak on shrill and angry hinges. People cannot hear us there. They cannot pass through. Not the cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything is going to be all right, but a different, sometimes lonely place, the place of truth-telling. Truth-telling about your own soul, first of all, and its condition. The place of resistance and defiance, the piece of ground from which you see the world both as it is and as it could be and as it will be. The place from which you glimpse not only struggle, but the joy of struggle. And we stand there, beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing, asking people what they see. Here ends our reading. So today's reflection is titled Nurturing Hope. For some of us, just saying this word might conjure up the well-known bit of poetry from Emily Dickinson. You might have memorized it at some point in junior high or high school. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. It also reminds me of the Greek myth of Pandora's box. And let me tell you something, Pandora was set up. Because few tellers of the tale remember that it was Prometheus who stole fire from the gods, and that caused the gods to create Pandora to be the wife of Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Now, the gods gave Pandora a lot of gifts when they created her. They made her beautiful and charming, and most importantly, curious. Curious, that most human of qualities. And then they sent her to Epimetheus. And they also sent along the beautifully carved and decorated box, which Pandora was instructed to never, ever, ever open. Now, after a while, Epimetheus thought to ask his brother about this strange turn of events. And when he asked, well, Prometheus sent him straight home to his wife, saying that whatever was in that box couldn't be good, and Pandora shouldn't have ever been left alone with it. Now, we all recall that Pandora's curiosity, again, that very human trait, got the better of her. And when she lifted the lid, out came a buzzing black cloud of strange-looking winged creatures, which flew about her head and flew out the window, dispersing on the wind to the four corners of the earth, just as Pandora managed to slam the lid back on the box. When Epimetheus returned, Pandora explained what had happened and tearfully reported that she glimpsed that there was something still in the box, something shiny that she glimpsed right before the lid went down. Now, figuring that they had nothing left to lose and curious, they opened the box one more time together. And to their surprise, something golden and radiant arose from the box. In some versions of the story, this thing takes the form of a bird, like Dickinson's Thing with Feathers. In other versions, like this one, it appears as a fragrant, golden rose. A rose that Epimetheus and Pandora instinctively knew was hope. So yes, Pandora unleashed destruction and tragedy upon our world, but she also released hope. And all those hurtful, mean, and destructive things represented by the ugly winged creatures can be viewed as simply part of the fullness of life. For life does include difficult and tragic times, times like the times we're living in. And there's also always hope. Our own South Carolina state motto, it's on most of our license plates, if not all, where there's breath, there's hope. Now, hope is kind of important these days as we continue to live through a global pandemic, political division, and an uprising against white supremacy. People disagree, though, on what hope is. Many feel like hope is the feeling that things will turn out for the best. Things are going to be all right, as we heard in our reading. But this is like saying, I hope the sun comes up in the morning. Yeah, that's a sure thing. The sun will rise. Even if it's cloudy, it's up there and we know it. Well, your experience may be different from mine, but hoping for a sure thing is too easy. Hoping for something that seems unlikely or even impossible, well, that's harder. And maybe the hope we need is that found in a poem that I found titled, Hope is Not a Bird, Emily, It's a Sewer Rat, by domestic abuse survivor Caitlin Saida. That poem reads in part, hope is not the thing with feathers that comes home to roost when you need it most. It's what thrives in the discards and survives in the ugliest parts of our world, able to go on when nothing else can even find a way in. This is a grittier kind of hope. It's a clear-eyed hope that one needs to survive truly terrible times. So what is hope? Well, I'm sure we all have our own definitions. I've long held this quote from former political prisoner and later president of Czech Republic, Václav Havel, as a good definition for myself. Either we have hope within us or we don't. It is a dimension of the soul, and it's not essentially dependent on some particular observation of the world or estimate of the situation. Hope is an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond its horizons. Hope is not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless how it turns out. The certainty that something makes sense, regardless how it turns out. In that song, there are a few lines that jump out for me. And the first one is, hope is not a feeling, hope is an action. Hope requires action, not passivity. The orientation of the spirit toward hope can be nurtured by action. As Joan Baez is said to have said, hope is the antidote to despair. Now, hope is not emotion. Krista Tippett writes about hope in her book, Becoming Wise, pulling together excerpts from interviews with several people, including Brené Brown. And Brown pointed out that, quote, hope is a function of struggle. Hope is not an emotion. Hope is a cognitive behavioral process that we learn when we experience adversity, when we have relationships that are trustworthy, and when people have faith in our ability to get out of a jam, unquote. So if we've never experienced hard times, we've never had to develop true hope. So how do we take action? How do we nurture this orientation? Well, lots of things are acts of living and acts of hope. I remember the late Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, counseled people always to look for the helpers when terrible things happened. And that can be helpful in nurturing hope. Just seeing others doing good work to help people is inspirational to us, inspirational to others. It's also important to claim our own agency by making choices that sustain us personally, making a choice to do something positive, even if it's a small thing that can support one's sense of hope. Small acts of kindness toward others nurture your own sense of hope and helps to encourage others at the same time. And wearing a mask, just wearing a mask whenever you go out in public and are interacting with other people, that can help you maintain your own sense of hope. Taking action in community with others is also important. I'm thinking here of the work done, the fine work done by UU the Vote through our UUA's Side with Love campaign in the last election cycle. Even during a global pandemic, when we couldn't get together in person, people got to work with others toward a common goal of making positive change happen. Now, other hopeful acts done in community with others are things like volunteering for a Habitat for Humanity project, which fulfills a hope for a particular family, but it's also an act of hope for a neighborhood and a city and even a world. And going out on the second helpings distribution runs, Tom has started to do that again once a month. That is a small act that brings tangible good to other people and helps nurture their hope and our own hope. And it feels particularly important to talk about hope right now in the second year of a global pandemic. There's a lot of frustration being expressed in social discourse these days. We're frustrated at people who refuse to wear masks or refuse to be vaccinated. We're frustrated at having to be online for worship again. We're frustrated at leaders who refuse to issue mandates to protect public health. And they're frustrated at our own inability to move freely in the world, unencumbered by masks and free of concern. And for some, it feels like time that we should just be done with this. We should just get on with our lives and let the chips fall, even though those chips at this point are falling on the most vulnerable among us, our children. Humanity has been here before, though. So let's take some hope from that. We have been here before. The most direct comparison is that time of the previous global influenza epidemic known as the Spanish flu in the early 20th century. Now, at that time, there were governmental mandates requiring quarantines, and after a while, that was working pretty well until the public parades celebrating the end of the First World War. People got together in crowds at those parades, and the flu spread again like wildfire. During World War II, the people of London endured many, many hardships, and it's a different situation, but there were also restrictions on people's movement then. Air raid sirens would send people to communal or private shelters. Families sent their children to the community, to the country, to keep them safe. One of the most onerous restrictions required people to have heavy curtains on their windows. These were blackout restrictions, and all of the external lights to be turned off at night. Now, this seems like a reasonable and simple requirement, like wearing masks. And people still said, we want to be able to have our curtains open. We want to be able to have our front door lights on and the street lights on. But it was a necessary precaution. Later in the 20th century, polio caused families to, again, in this country, to send their children to the country in the summer to avoid urban public swimming pools and other chances to contract the deadly disease. And of course, what eventually alleviated the polio scares was what? A vaccine. Now, some of us may remember the big public immunization drives with communities opening up schools and other buildings on evenings and weekends to get people in to get their polio vaccines. Now, going back to Havel's words, hope is not optimism. It's the conviction that what we're doing makes sense regardless of the outcome. And right now, what makes sense is for us to be worshiping online again. I'm sorry. I really wish it were different, but that's what it is. We're not all right. We're not all right. Our country, our world is not all right. This is not the time to give up. We need to take concrete action to nurture our hope. We need to turn toward one another for support and keep moving together. Keep on moving forward toward this difficult time. Poet Wendell Berry suggested that hope is founded in reality on the ground beneath our feet, and yet it must be lighted by that which is within us. The light of imagination and dreams which allow us to envision a better future than the present. As the Banksons sang, right now we're planting seeds, and they're gonna grow into something we don't know. We don't know what's coming next, but we have hope that it will be better. There's no one answer on how to find or maintain hope, but we can cultivate our orientation toward hope. We can create hope in our actions for others and for the common good. And we can hold hope for others, as our opening song told us. We can hold hope until others can hope for themselves. We are living in difficult, difficult times, and we need each other. Let's bring our collective imagination, our collective courage, and our collective caring to bear in this time. And as we tend the rose of hope, let us bring a better tomorrow for all of us. So may it be. Our closing words are from Annie Forster. As far as our love flows, as far as our hope grows, as far as our yearning grows, we are no farther from one another. And I invite you to sing along as Chris plays for us our closing song, There Is More Love Somewhere. And I invite you to join me in our chalice extinguishing words that are up on our screen. The chalice flame is extinguished until once again ignited by the strength of our gathering in community with a mission for justice and our hearts full of love. And next week, we hope you will join us for our worship service titled Union Made. It is Labor Day weekend next Sunday.